What if the world paused the moment you truly looked? What if your gaze was not just sight, but a kind of call that the universe answers? Most people believe the world is solid. It sits there, unbothered, doing its own thing. But beneath the surface, reality is more like an unstitched tapestry, threads waiting to be woven. You do not merely witness the weave, your attention takes a needle. There was a woman, ordinary in the ways that matter. She kept trying the same fixes. She mapped her dreams, repeated affirmations, begged for signs. Yet morning after morning, the pattern returned. The same small arguments, the same narrow paychecks, the same tired ache. She exhausted the doing. Then one night she stopped the doing. She stopped the chasing. She sat quietly and watched without wanting. Not hopeful, not fearful, just present. And something shifted. Not the outside first. The seam between her and the world softened. Her watching was different. It had no grip. It had no script. It was an opening. Here is the hidden key. Reality is not a finished painting hung before you. It is a field of threads, possibilities waiting for touch. When you watch with tension, you tug one thread and the weave tightens into the painful shape you expected. When you watch with ease, a different pattern can be threaded through. Science gives us a mirror for this. In classic experiments, tiny particles behave like many potential paths until someone looked. Under observation, they chose a single stance. The act of watching changed what unfolded. This is not mystical poetry only. It is the way attention and form converse. The radical part is this. Every thought, every label you place, every feeling that laces your attention acts like a direction. Fearfully focused on lack, you anchor a narrow timeline. Gentle curiosity, and you allow other threads to be seen. This is not blame, it is practice. The quality of your attention is the instrument that tunes which possibility answers you. So ask gently, what kind of watcher are you? When you notice your life, are you reaching with clenched hands or opening your palms to what might arrive? You are not helpless, you are a participant. Shift the tone of your seeing, and you change the kinds of things that find their way to you. A small note to hold. Clarity of attention is a kind of kindness. When you soften your gaze, you do not trick the world. You simply allow a fuller pattern to be noticed. And often the bravest act is to stop trying so hard to pull a thread and learn how to let a new stitch form. They are not truly observing, they are projecting again and again, stamping the same picture onto the canvas of their lives. And this leads us to one of the most misunderstood truths about manifestation. You are not here to build the universe from raw stone. You are here to refine the lens through which you look, to watch from love instead of hunger, from openness instead of defense, from awareness instead of assumption. The shift happens when you stop reacting as though life is an emergency and begin witnessing as though you are sovereign. In that state, the full force of the observer effect becomes available. You are no longer collapsing reality by accident. You collapse it consciously. Mystics hinted at this for centuries. Physicists confirmed it in equations. Your inner climate is not just shaped by the outer world. It is the outer world that bends in response to the one who watches within. Change the way you see, and the world rearranges to match. Observe through the lens of peace, and unrest begins to unravel. Observe yourself with compassion, and old labels lose their glue. But this is not easy work. It asks you to let go of the comfort of being right about your pain. It asks you to release the armor that kept you small. It asks you to surrender the illusion that life is simply happening to you, and instead step into the weight of frequency. Because you do not receive what you casually want. You magnetize what you steadily focus on with emotional certainty. That is the first doorway, to notice what you are noticing. And then to ask, softly but clearly, does this focus weave the reality I long for, or the one I fear? The field does not respond to your rituals alone. It responds to the flavor of your attention. If you have doubted that consciousness carries weight, it is only because you have not seen the observer effect for what it is. This is not just metaphor. It is one of the most astonishing discoveries in physics. Every measurement, every act of observation collapses a haze of probabilities into a single event. Once you grasp this, you cannot pretend your attention is neutral. Every glance is a brushstroke. Every thought is a choice of color. To look is to create. Remember the experiment with two slits, where scientists expected electrons to behave like tiny bullets, predictable and obedient. But when unobserved, they scattered like waves, overlapping, interfering, moving through both paths at once as if holding all options. Yet the instant they were measured, the wave dissolved into a particle. The act of watching closed the field into one result. Awareness is the difference between possibility and form. This revelation shook the scientific world because it revealed something astonishing. Particles do not decide what they are until they are seen, until consciousness brushes against them, until observation ushers them into matter. They say without attention, everything rests as possibility. But when you look, potential takes shape, and here it becomes intimate. You are not a passive spectator. You are an active presence in the field, quietly taking measurements with your attention, and those measurements shape the weather of your life. Think of your morning ritual. You wake, you reach for your phone, your mind drops into accounts, conversations, aches. That tightness at the sternum, that old knot, those are not merely reactions to outer events, they are acts of seeing. You are observing through the residue of what you have already lived, and in doing so, you fold the moment toward the familiar. This is why repetition feels inevitable. Your watching is unconscious, and so the world returns the pattern you are tuned to. It is not because change is impossible, but because your attention is automatic. It keeps calling back the same scenery. Here is the hinge. The observer effect is not reserved for particles in a lab. It lives inside every thought, every belief, every offhand assumption. You look through habitual filters, and those filters hum with a frequency. They broadcast signals. The field answers with exactness. Look through the lens of lack, and your days gather evidence of lack. Look through suspicion, and events arrive like confirmations. You might name this proof of truth, but perhaps it is feedback, not indictment. A reflection of coherence, not cruelty. Your observation is not neutral machinery. It behaves like a tuning dial. Wherever you rest your attention, the field begins to align. If you wish for something different, you do not need to chase endlessly outward. You need to alter the tone of your attention, because a version of you already exists in possibility. Abundant, safe, loved, waiting to be seen with feeling as much as with thought. The change comes not as fixing, but as clearing. Healing is not about forcing outcomes. It is about wiping away the residue of old hurts and inherited stories so your sight is clean. When fear no longer colors the glance, new timelines can be perceived. When compassion softens how you witness yourself, worn identities begin to loosen their hold. You do not have to become a scientist to practice this. You only need to ask simple, precise questions. What am I really looking at? How am I meeting it? What energy am I lending to this moment? If everything shifts when attention falls upon it, then the manner of your seeing matters far more than you were taught. Remember the lesson from the experiment where particles held many paths until they were checked. In life, probabilities also hover until your gaze gives them an address. Attention chooses one corridor over another. It is the quiet selector that favors certain outcomes. So begin with awareness as your first tool. Notice the loops you return to without thinking. Name them without judgment. See their flavor. Then gently change the habitual habit. Soften the edge of your noticing. Invite curiosity where there was certainty. Let steadier, kinder feeling accompany what you observe. A simple practice. For a week, when a familiar fear surfaces, pause and widen the moment before you react. Breathe. Let the feeling exist without immediate commentary. Then ask, if I regarded this with kindness instead of alarm, what would I notice differently? This is not denial, it is retuning. Over time, those small shifts reorient the field. A closing whisper. Your attention is not a passive camera. It is an instrument that helps decide which potential becomes real. Treat it like a delicate compass. Point it with intention. When you do, the territory of your life will begin to reveal new paths that were there all along. But actually, reality is alive. A two-way dialogue between your inner tone and the field. It breathes in whatever frequency you offer. The more aware you become of the frequencies you habitually choose, the more creative influence you gain. You are not here to wrestle the field into submission. You are here to retune your listening because the world answers to the pitch of your attention. You do not change the entire cosmos by force. You change the way you listen, and the cosmos rearranges to meet that new note. Effort without clarity is like shouting into a closed room. Awareness is the key that opens the door. When awareness shifts, forms begin to move. It may feel like nothing changes because the same scene keeps replaying, but the truer reason is that you keep collapsing the same timeline by looking through the same tired lens. Not because fate is unkind. Habit is a loop. Each time you see through it, you reselect the same outcome. Think of the common patterns in your life: emotional repetition, identical assumptions, predictable expectations. You view the present with eyes shaped by the past and then wonder why the future looks like that same old map. In the field, nothing repeats unless you choose it again. You choose it every time your attention returns to an old frequency. Imagine you carry a wound of abandonment. Once someone left and your nervous system took a note. That recording runs audibly when new lovers arrive. You may say the words, "I am open," but your energy scans for departures. You watch for signs of leaving with a readiness that is not neutral. You fold suspicion into your seeing, and soon the world supplies confirming evidence. Your ego applauds, "I told you so," but the event was not destiny. It was a selection enacted by your habitual gaze. This is not judgment. It is liberation, because seeing it means you can choose to stop. Money works the same way. If your heart clenches at the sight of your balance and you narrate scarcity, you are broadcasting a lack frequency. That tone magnetizes scenarios that match your vibration. The field answers the quality of your attention, not the script of your wishes. That is why practices without inner recalibration often feel hollow. The universe responds to the consistent hum you carry when no one is watching. The remedy is not more trying, it is lens work. Clear the residue of old hurts, inherited beliefs, and identity stories that tint your sight. When fear no longer colors your glance, new options become visible. When you witness yourself with gentleness, the old patterns begin to slacken. So begin with small experiments. Notice the pattern that greets you each morning. When a familiar fear rises, pause. Feel it without commentary. Then ask, if I looked at this moment from a steadier heart, what else might appear? Little by little, that different way of seeing will alter the field's response. A final whisper. Your attention is a tuned instrument. Play it with intention. When you lift the quality of your listening, the life that answers will be unexpectedly kinder and far more varied than the stories you keep repeating. Here's the subtle trap. The longer you stare at the same picture of reality, the more solid it feels. The more solid it feels, the more you believe it cannot shift. That is how cycles sustain themselves. Attention shapes experience. Experience intensifies emotion. Emotion fuels attention. And the wheel keeps turning. The way out is not resistance. It is a gentler form of seeing. When you stop reacting and start witnessing, the loop begins to loosen. When you replace repetition with reframing, the energy of the moment changes. The true shift has never been about the object in front of you, but the vibration from which you view it. This is the inner work, to question the eyes you are looking through. Is it the voice of your younger self interpreting this moment, or the presence of your wiser self who has already touched possibility? Is your focus dripping with fear or rooted in potential? Slowly, you begin to see that outer events are simply the echo of inner perception. The people you meet are not accidents. They mirror your frequency. Even your body, with its signals and tensions, reflects the observer within. From here, new timelines become available. The instant you stop choosing with your past and start watching from the vantage point of your future self, openings reveal themselves. The opportunities were always there. You just weren't aligned with them. It isn't that you failed at manifesting, it's that you faithfully created a version of reality that matched your old emotional code. Waking up to that pattern gives you back your power. Now you are no longer a prisoner of what is. You are the chooser of what will be. You are no longer hypnotized by results and calling them truth. You are watching from the frequency of what is emerging, and the field listens, not with judgment, but with exquisite accuracy. So if you are done recreating the same story, change the eyes you are seeing with. Polish the lens. Step into the self who looks through love, trust, and expansion. Because the quantum field does not take things personally, it answers with precision. The moment your attention changes its note, the architecture of your world rearranges. And there is always that quiet turning point in awakening. The recognition that transformation does not begin with doing. It begins with looking, not with struggle, but with deeper sight. To see clearly, you must begin to look without dragging the old stories into every moment, without judgment, without panic, with presence. Because the way you look decides what reality unveils right now. The field around and within you is alive with possibility, endless outcomes, endless versions of your life, waiting for the note of your attention. But this field does not open to grasping or pressure. It responds to alignment, to coherence, to the quiet strength of awareness. So let us begin. Find a place where stillness can hold you. You need nothing more than your body, your breath, and the willingness to observe without armor. Sit gently. Allow your spine to rise as if remembering its natural strength. Close your eyes, not to retreat, but to turn your awareness inward where true observation begins. Place one hand over your heart and the other over your belly. Feel the center of frequency, your inner compass of truth. Breathe slowly through your nose. Hold. Exhale softly through your mouth. Let your shoulders drop. Let your mind unclench. Let the need to solve everything sink into the ground. With each breath, sense the subtle field around you, not seen by the eyes but known by the body. Intelligent, responsive, alive, listening. Now invite into your awareness one situation in your life that feels unmoving. Perhaps a desire you've been chasing, a challenge that weighs on you, or a vision that has not yet stepped into form. Don't force it. Let it come forward on its own. And when it does, notice not what you've done about it, but how you have been looking at it. Through frustration, through impatience, through doubt. Can you feel the texture of your gaze? Here is the turning point. Take a breath. Imagine observing that same situation as if it had already unfolded, as if the resolution was here. Imagine yourself on the other side, looking back from a place of peace, of trust, of love. Feel how your chest loosens, how your mind softens, how your field responds. In that moment, you are no longer pushing against reality. You are witnessing it into alignment. In this state, you are no longer collapsing the old version of reality. You are selecting a new one. Nothing outside of you needed to shift. What changed was the way you looked, and in the quantum world that changes everything. Hold that perspective now. Do not try to manipulate it. Do not chase an outcome. Simply remain the observer, calm, grounded, assured. Allow the field to register your shift. This is where creation truly begins. Not through strain, but through frequency. Not through force, but through becoming the version of you who no longer needs to push, who already knows alignment is enough. Take one more deep breath. As you exhale, open your eyes, not to return to the same reality, but to step back into it as a new observer. Let this way of seeing become your natural practice. To pause, to feel, to reframe, to choose to look through the lens of your future rather than your past. The greatest upgrade you will ever make is not in your circumstances, but in the quality of your gaze. Declare it. Say to yourself, I observe with new eyes. Even writing these words anchors the frequency. Your observation is encoded into everything you do, even the digital traces you leave behind. You are not a passive character inside this story. You are the consciousness that writes it, one observation at a time. So observe with wisdom, observe with courage, observe with love, and watch as the structure of your world reshapes itself to match. Because most people do not realize they are reacting more than they are creating. Their nervous systems are trapped in prediction, scanning, defending, anticipating. They say they want change, yet their frequency is still tied to old reactions. But there exists a subtle, powerful space where transformation ignites. A space where you no longer react, you witness. And in that stillness, timelines bend. For the field does not respond to noise or drama. It responds to depth. And depth cannot bloom while you are chasing, proving, or defending. Depth only emerges when you are still enough to observe without interference. Let's be clear. This is not passivity. This is precision. When you react, you collapse into the past. You fuse with the trigger, you lose your sovereign frequency and take on the vibration of survival. The moment that happens, your observation no longer creates, it merely repeats. When you react from defense, you are arguing with reality. What you resist, you nourish. The more you struggle, the more the old pattern fattens. But when you meet life from steady presence, not indifference, but grounded calm, you open a space. In that space, the field can rearrange itself. Possibilities unclench. Energy resorts, not because you force it, but because you allow it. Learning non-reactive awareness is a retraining. It asks you to sit with uncertainty without collapsing. It asks you to become fluent in feeling so you can notice emotion without becoming the emotion. Say to yourself, I notice this, I feel this, and I do not have to become it. The more you practice that pause, the less you push against the current, and the more intelligence in the field can meet you on new terms. When a tense conversation sparks and you observe instead of defend, you carry a clearer note. When finances tighten and you witness the fear instead of spiraling, you steady the signal of abundance beneath it. When plans fall apart and you breathe rather than panic, you give the field room to place you differently. This is not bypassing reality, it is mastery. It is choosing coherence over reflex. It is holding fast to your chosen vibration, even while the old scene tugs at you. Often the shifts look like miracles. They are simply the field finally responding to the frequency you have been quietly broadcasting. The power is rarely in what you meant. It is in what you permit, not in chasing, but in witnessing with full presence. When you stop folding into reactivity and begin settling into awareness, the field takes your cue. It ceases echoing the worn loops and begins to answer the clearer signal you now carry. And that accelerates manifestation. Not because you push harder, but because you step aside and let alignment steer. Next time you feel the reflex to control, to prove, to explain, pause, breathe, sense the sensation, hold your look steady. Remember that stillness is not weakness. It is the ground from which power rises. You have been told you are a creator, that thoughts shape outcomes, and that energy attracts. All true, but only when you understand the observer's role. You are not here merely to wish. You are here to revise how you see, to observe with intention, and to design your life by the clarity of your attention. Not by force, but by the tone you carry. The truth is, your outer world has always been a reflection of your inner lens. Not only your beliefs, but the very way you observe. What you stare at with frustration tends to freeze. What you witness with neutrality begins to shift. What you see with compassion transforms. This is not magic, it's mechanics. The observer effect doesn't respond to your goals. It responds to your gaze. And the quality of that gaze, frantic or peaceful, fearful or faithful, reactive or sovereign, determines what solidifies next. So if you want change, stop chasing outcomes. Start calibrating your observation. See yourself not as someone searching for the answer, but as the consciousness through which the answer arrives. See your pain not as proof that something's broken, but as an invitation to see deeper. Notice the delays, the detours, the closed doors, not as rejection, but as refinement of your frequency. Because the moment you shift the way you look at the world rearranges itself around your gaze. Timelines collapse when you stop trying to fix. Manifestations accelerate when you stop forcing. The right people, ideas, and opportunities appear the moment you stop proving and start being. You become the architect of reality the instant you choose how to see, not what to see. And that choice, made again and again, becomes your new baseline, your new frequency, your new timeline. And trust, that is everything. For the quantum field doesn't reward effort, it responds to coherence. And coherence is born the moment your observation is anchored in truth, not panic. This is how you enter your next reality, not by pushing harder, but by becoming still enough to hear the signal. By embodying the observer life responds to, not the reactor life controls. So pause, breathe, witness. And if these words resonate, let it be known. Right below, I observe with new eyes, Let that be your declaration. Share this with someone whose timeline is ready to shift, because you are not just moving through life. You are shaping it, one observation at a time.